question. Hello, Kim. I was wondering if you could make a video on angels. They are quite important in Western religion and various New Age teachings. There are even certain masters who are called archangels, such as Michael, implying that they are regular angels in the spiritual realm. Maitreya's book also says angels earn their own version of the ascension. What are these beings? Well, it's a very difficult topic to talk about because angels is one of these words that have been used in many different religious and spiritual teachings, and they've been used in various ways. So it's, in a sense you could say, you want me to talk about angels, what do you mean with angels? Define angels. And different spiritual movements or teachings and religious teachings will have different definitions of it. It's the same as I've said before, the word soul is almost meaningless because there's so many different ways of defining it. And many times you will see people start talking about this, like you find many New Age teachings, spiritual teachings, that talk about angels without defining it. So what are they talking about? Two different teachings can be talking about two different kinds of beings. They just use the same word. So what I would do is I would refer to what I've talked about in several videos, that the material universe has four levels. There's the identity realm, the mental, the emotional, and the physical. I explained this more in my video about how the world was created. And of course beyond that is the spiritual realm. But what I also explained is that even the spiritual realm has levels, different spheres that were created in succession. So what we need to recognize here that in all levels of creation there are self-aware beings. And with self-aware beings I mean beings who are able to realize I exist, I have a certain mind, certain consciousness, but I have the potential to change it. So you can say a cow. It's lying on a field chewing the cud. On the field next to it there's a horse running around. And the cow looks at the horse and says, gee, I'd sure like to know how it is like to be a horse and run around like that. But see, the cow doesn't have the ability to do that because it doesn't have self-awareness. So what I'm talking about here is self-aware beings that, and self-awareness comes from the fact that our world, as I explained again in how the world was created by one being, our creator, and that being created everything out of its own consciousness, out of its own being. There was nothing else to start with. So in a sense you could say everything is created out of the creator's consciousness, but there are only certain beings that are endowed with the self-awareness of the creator. So self-awareness doesn't mean that I exist as an independent being. And I'm self-aware because I'm a completely independent being and my self-awareness is just all internal. No, my self-awareness is because I'm an extension of the greatest being. That's why I have self-awareness. So, going back to the four levels of the material realm. We human beings, we are the self-aware beings at the physical level. We are in physical bodies. We are embodied in physical bodies. And we have self-awareness, or at least we have the potential to become self-aware. And with self-aware, I really mean that we become aware. We are spiritual beings. We are an extension of the one mind of the Creator. That's the highest level of self-awareness. But many people are, of course, not aware of that, so they're not fully self-aware, but at least they have the potential. Then you have, in the emotional, mental, and identity realm, they are also self-aware beings. And they also have various degrees of self-awareness. It's not that just because you're in the mental realm, for example, you necessarily have a higher level of awareness than people in embodiment. That depends on what you have done, how you have grown in self-awareness. But of course you do have the awareness that there's something beyond the physical. Because you are experiencing, if you're in the mental realm, you are experiencing at least the emotional below you and the physical below you. You may not necessarily experience the identity realm above you. That depends on your self-awareness. But you are aware that there's something below you. In the physical, you can be completely unaware that there's anything beyond the material world, which is what you see with people who believe in scientific materialism. So, where I'm going with this is that these realms, the 4 levels of the material universe, they're interconnected. In fact, they are created in succession. So, the creation of our world started in the spiritual realm with the beings who have ascended in previous spheres. Again, I explained this in how the world was created. The ascended masters. They created first the identity realm, and then they sent self-aware extensions of themselves into that realm to help facilitate the creation of the mental realm and the structures in the mental realm. Then self-aware beings were sent into the mental realm to facilitate the creation of the emotional realm. Again, self-aware beings sent there to facilitate the creation of the physical realm. And then we human beings were sent into the physical realm to facilitate the further evolution, growth of the physical realm. So, in a sense, the Ascended Masters are, in a sense, serving all of the self-aware beings in the 4 levels. The beings in the mental realm, in the identity realm, are serving all the ones below them, same with the mental, emotional. And then in the physical, we human beings are really serving the evolution of the whole physical realm, including animals and nature spirits and this and that. So, throughout the ages, there are some beings, some people, who have made contact with these higher realms. As I've explained, the core of your being is the conscious you, which is expressing itself through your identity, mental and emotional and physical, but it hasn't become your outer personality, your 4 lower bodies. That is, it still has the potential to step outside the 4 lower bodies, and it can either experience itself as pure awareness, or it can reach higher, so it can experience the emotional realm, or the mental, or the identity, or even the spiritual. So throughout the ages, there are people who have had experiences of these higher levels. 3 higher levels of the physical or the material world and the spiritual realm. And even various levels of the spiritual realm people have had experiences of. And they have experienced that there are self-aware beings in those realms. And so now the question is, what do you call these beings? And they have been called angels, they have been called spirits, spirit guides, gods and goddesses. It's just a matter of how you look at it. I think in the East, there's a tendency in the Hindu religion, there was probably originally some genuine contact with these beings, and they were called gods. In the West, they were called angels, generally speaking. Because we have the sense there's only one God. There can only be one God. Which is true in a sense there's only one creator for our world form, at least. So, it's really, in a sense, it's a matter of semantics. There are these beings, and some of these beings are there to serve us and help our growth. But it depends on their level of self-awareness. Do they see themselves as serving us selflessly, or do they have some agenda, such as getting energy from us? And so that's why you have, there are angels and there are demons, for example. As I've explained also in the emotional realm, the lowest aspect of the emotional realm is what you can call the astral plane, which corresponds to what people have seen as hell. And there are demons there who are seeking to trick us or force us to steal our energy. There are also those who are called fallen angels. Or I prefer to call them fallen beings, because they didn't fall from the spiritual realm. They fell in a previous undescended sphere, as I again explained, in how the world was created. So all I'm trying to say is here that you can say that any being in the emotional, mental, and identity realm, and any being in the spiritual realm that is serving us, you can call that an angel. You can. But the question is, what is your definition of an angel? Because in the Christian or the Old Testament tradition, it's generally seen that God created the angels in their current state, and they are in a perfect state, and they are not growing. They are created to fulfill a specific function, but they're not growing. They're just carrying out that function. And what I'm saying is that the reality here is that these beings were not created in a perfect state. They were created with, just like us, with some limited sense of self, and they have the potential to expand it. The angels have the potential, beings in the emotional, mental, identity level, they have their potential to expand their self-awareness. And the whole thing revolves around the fact that these 4 levels of the material world, we are in an unascended sphere. That means that none of the beings in these 4 levels, whether you call them angels or not, are ascended. They're not permanent beings. They haven't qualified for their ascension. And which I explain is, you overcome the desire to be a separate, self-centered being. You are rising to the level where you're working to raise the whole, because you see that everything is a connected whole. And that's how you become a permanent being and rise to the spiritual realm. So you could also say that only those beings who have risen to the ascended realm are really angels in the highest sense of the word. And the Ascended Masters do talk about there are angels, there are angelic bands. There are different angelic bands that have different functions. For example, in a few videos I've talked about there are 7 spiritual types of energies that are generally called the 7 spiritual rays. And for each of these rays there's a band of angels whose job is really to facilitate that the energies of that ray, that spiritual ray, is lowered in vibration in order to uphold the material world, the unascended sphere, in order to help us grow. So this is the way I look at this with my current understanding. I'm not saying I have a final understanding of this, but the way I look at it with my current understanding is that the angels are primarily focused on the energetic aspects of the world. So they're constantly engaged in this process of lowering the vibration of spiritual energy to the level of the spiritual realm. And they do this with the 7 spiritual rays, because they are making up the material world. And they also have specific functions, like the first ray is a very blue flame energy that is good for protecting your energy field. So that's why we have these decrees to Archangel Michael for protection of your energy field. Then you have another group of beings in the spiritual realm that are called the Elohim, and they were the ones who actually manifested the physical forms we see in the material world. As I said, they started with a matrix they formulated in the spiritual realm, then it was lowered into the identity realm, then the emotional, and the mental, the emotional, and the physical. So the way these works together is, you have the archangels who are working with the Elohim, but the archangels are, let's say, they are lowering energy into the identity realm. Then the Elohim are with their minds imposing thought matrices, mental images upon that energy, so it takes on a certain form, a certain structure. And then that goes down to the mental. First the energies are lowered, then the structures, and so forth. And then you have a third group of beings in the ascended realm, which are called, in a narrow way, could be called ascended masters, because many of them have ascended from our unascended sphere. Not all of them, because some ascended in the previous sphere. See, that's why it gets confusing. So In a sense, you could say that a narrow definition of an ascended master when it relates to earth is someone who ascended from earth and is now working with earth because it has the experience of what it was like, how difficult it was to ascend from earth, and therefore is uniquely suited for helping us who have not yet ascended, ascend. But you could also use a more broad definition and say that all beings in the spiritual realm are ascended masters because they have a certain self-awareness that they are beyond selfishness. And so what the ascended masters have explained is that even some of the angels, they started out as unascended beings, not necessarily in our sphere, and they worked their way up. Because again, you don't actually, let's put it this way, you can't, no, let's step back even further. Yeah, everything in our world revolves around free will, the growth in consciousness. We are meant to grow in awareness, we only grow by making choices. So you cannot be created permanently in the ascended state. And that's where even some previous ascended master teachings, they had this idea that, for example, Archangel Michael started out as a very low being and worked his way up, but they still had the idea that angels or many beings in the ascended realm were created in a perfect state. But the reality is you can't be created in an ascended state. You have to be created in an unascended state, and you exercise your free will until you come to the point where you can consciously choose to leave behind separation, duality, selfishness, self-centeredness. You unite with the one mind, the Christ mind, and you are now working for the all. Like Jesus said, he who would be greatest among you, let him be the servant of all. So that's how you qualify to be an ascended being. And that's why you can say that the Elohim, the archangels that we know about from our level, they also were at one point started out as unascended beings, and through their free will choosing, they ascended to that level. And that's why you can say the Elohim, the archangels, is just a function they have chosen to take on. And they can choose at some point to move on and do something different. So that's why I'm saying, in a sense, in a broader sense, you can say all beings in the spiritual realm are ascended masters because they ascended by mastering their own minds and their free will, their sense of self. In a more narrow sense, there are ascended beings who have specific functions. Some are the Elohim that are creators of form, some are the archangels, the facilitators of energy, and then some are the ascended masters that are serving as our guides. Now there are many layers of ascended masters, many different functions, of course. And there are also many layers of angels at a higher function. So again, it's a tricky topic because you can define it in different ways. And really what you have to do is you have to be careful you don't become attached to a specific outer definition expressed in words. Because what you want to do as a spiritual being is you want to have an experience of these beings. So I have met people on a spiritual path who feel very familiar with angels. There are even some people who believe that they are embodied angels, and they came out of a certain angelic band. So if that's the case for you, what you want to do is forget about the outer definition expressed in words, right? If you disagree with what I'm saying here, don't be focused on disproving or proving me wrong. If you feel an affinity with a certain type of angels, then do everything you can to have a direct experience of these beings in the ascended realm. Not in the emotional, mental, and identity realm, but the ones in the ascended realm. Do everything you can. Raise your consciousness, dissolve the subconscious selves, so you can experience the angels directly. And then see what that gets you. If you feel more attuned to the ascended masters, do everything you can to have a direct experience of the ascended masters. In a sense, all of the teachings I'm giving here on YouTube and everything in my books are designed to help you attune to beings in the spiritual realm that you have an affinity with. So forget about the outer definitions here. The real important thing is your attunement, so you have a direct experience of these beings that goes way beyond anything that can be said in words. So basically what I would say here is it's always a matter of reaching for the direct experience. That's what I've always been guided by. And if you feel an affinity with angels, then seek to have that direct experience and see where that goes. It's not my intention here to say that you can only look at angels the way I'm describing it. If you want to look at it a different way, it doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is, don't focus on the outer expression and the definitions. Seek to go beyond that to have the direct experience.